Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Cross-Border Talks. We are now coming to Germany, a little late after the German elections, but before the official formation of the German government. And the German elections are the ones that all Europe follows in interest. They can determine not only politics inside Germany, but also give a stimulus, an influence to the directions of European politics. That is why we are making this episode to explain why did Germans vote the way they vote, who has the greatest chance to lead the country in the following years, and what would be consequences for German neighbors, for Europe, and for the world. Again, welcome to Cross Border Talks, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. And now Vladimir is going to present our guest, who is going to answer the questions in an expert way.
Our interlocutor today is Konrad Watrin. He's a former DPA journalist and also a foreign correspondent. He used to be a foreign correspondent in Cairo. His PhD deals with international politics in the Middle East, and he also has the career of educator, professor at university or high school. So he's very fluent on any social and political matters related to Germany and international relations. Welcome to the program, Konrad. And let us start first with the current situation. There are ongoing coalition negotiations, and they already seem to be acquiring certain shape. We know that most likely Olaf Scholz will be the next chancellor, and we know the most likely elements of this coalition in terms of parties. What should we know about Olaf Scholz, and who are the other strong persons or politicians or policies, important policies, which will be applied by the expected new government?
Okay, Vlado, these are a lot of questions. To give you the first most important answer for Europe is Germans are pretty much aware of how important this government and this election was for the whole of Europe. And as was the case with Angela Merkel, the same we can say about Olaf Scholz. So not very much will change, not very much, except, of course, he's building the government with different parties. The Social Democrats are the same. The Greens are a bit more left-wing, but also a bit more conservative to certain degrees. And the Liberals in the center, well, we don't really quite know where they are because they don't have very outright programs. They mainly have only one program, which means as little taxation as possible, and that's it basically. But still, they are a very important stabilizing factor. So what I think is Olaf Scholz, he won't change the policy of Angela Merkel very much. What the Germans voted for was security. This is easily explained from German history. We love to see the new faces, but we didn't really want to have a change. It's as simple as that. And given the options we had, I think what is going on now is the best solution we could get. To get into the intricacies of domestic policy would take too long. It's a very contradictory situation. Olaf Scholz, in essence, he's a conservative pragmatist. The danger for his government could be that he could be overcross with his own party very soon, and it will depend from the Greens if they proclaim, if they'd like to follow more radical policies, he'll have problems. But the major problems will probably derive from his own party. I remember, I'd like to remind you, we once had a chancellor called Helmut Schmidt. He, in my mind, he was the best chancellor Germany had, apart from Konrad Adenauer, immediately after the war. And he was, in the end, he had to run his government against his own party. That was the background at the time of the early 80s, was the Soviet rearmament, and his party was more or less pacifist. He was the one who, Helmut Schmidt was the one who directed even in the United States and the whole West, the whole NATO, to rearm with new rockets. Otherwise, the Cold War would not have been decided the way it did. And that was maybe the last time, I think, in history, in recent history, that there was a political lead. After that, we ran into a domestic policy situation in which, democratically elected governments try to fulfill the desire of the people. Okay, basically what they did was, and Angela Merkel was fantastic. She was absolutely crack in this regard. Just listen to the polls and do not go one step further. Otherwise, you could easily lose control about the situation. So don't risk too much. What I mean is that it is very difficult, and it's much too early still to judge about the long reign of Angela Merkel. It depends actually with which foot you get up. Sometimes I get up with my left foot and then I say, wow, incredible achievement what she did. She held Europe together, etc. But on the other hand, the next day I wake up with my right foot and it says, well, there's so much to be done, and she didn't even try it. We don't have an army, we don't have a stand in the world, we as Europe are falling apart, etc., etc. The problems are gigantic and nothing has been solved. So it's very difficult to judge about that. Basically, however, Olaf Scholz will take the same policy in almost any regard, I suppose. The other important figures, Christian Lindner of the Liberal Party will certainly be an important one, but we don't know yet whether he'll be able to get the financial secretary, the post of financial secretary, or whether he's going to be foreign minister. This is still, there are a few speculations, but that's not very interesting, actually. Probably the leading figure of the coalition partners will be Robert Habeck, who is the co-leader of the Green Party, who tragically was not chosen as candidate for the chancellorship, because if he would have been the candidate of the Green Party and not Annalena Baerbock, the young woman who was simply much too inexperienced, the Green Party would have got maybe more than 30% with Robert Habeck. And he is a very shrewd, very intelligent, he's a journalist, an author. He was already minister for something in Schleswig-Holstein in North Germany. And he's a very pragmatic, but very solid, very clear and intelligent green politician. Probably he's going to be the next foreign secretary and vice chancellor of the republic. I think these are the major guys. But as I said at the beginning, important is also who are going to be the next in the second row of the Social Democratic Party. And there you have left-wingers, which might cause problems to Olaf Scholz. This is unclear at the moment. You can't say it.
You said that a lot of problems were left unsolved after the long reign of Angela Merkel. There's a lot of things to be done, and I wanted to ask, what would be then the main challenges of the new government in domestic policy?
Well, there are so many challenges, of course. The biggest challenge I see is not the climate crisis. It's important, but it's a question for the whole world. The most important is the social question. We have social problems in Germany. The consumer power of lots of people, of young people, of pensioners, but also of common workers with little income. The consumer power is much too little. And for example, we have more and more pensioners who have to work. I'm still working as a teacher with 70 years. I don't really have to. I also love to teach my staff, but there are quite a few social problems, I think. In terms of international policy, it's quite obvious. Right now, we are maybe at the most important moment in Europe. The decision the Polish government takes now in the quarrel with Brussels will be decisive. It could be that it's in the hand of Poland and Hungary, of course, to split up the whole thing, to finish the European Union. I mean, this is a real big problem. Behind this problem is, of course, the fact that we have been relying, after the turn of 1989 and 1990, we were extremely lucky to have a political figure like Mikhail Gorbachev in the Soviet Union. This enabled us to try and to believe that the same path of reconciliation towards Eastern Europe would be possible. The same path we had since the 1950s, especially the 1960s, with Western Europe. And it looked pretty good at the beginning. If you remember the days of Helmut Kohl and Mazowiecki, Bartoszewski, etc., it was a wonderful time, and we did as much as we could, and it was a matter of heart. For Helmut Kohl and his generation, also for Angela Merkel it was, but that was a different time now. And this is gone. This is gone. Now it's about national interests, and we can see what's going on. Between Britain and France, for example, they are already sending out their warships to protect the fishermen. This is an absurdity which we never thought could happen again. It's something more than 10 years. I remember that Angela Merkel and that we believed that this process of European integration is unreversible, irrevocable. It wasn't true. It is. We might reach a final point. And if you look at the numbers of people agreeing to going on in all the countries, you have lots of countries in which the consent to this kind of European Union, the way it is structured now, is less than 50%. And even in Germany, I think it's slightly more than 50%. This is not enough. This is simply not enough. And I'm not sure whether it will hold. What makes us what makes me personally very happy is to see that thousands and 10,000s of Polish people, that the civil society in Poland seems to be entirely different from the government. The government represents a clear minority. So we still have hope, but this hope we don't have anymore with Hungary. Hungary has gone the Russian way, and the question is whether we shouldn't let them go. The problem is we can't. You can't kick anybody out. So it's a very complicated thing to change this kind of European Union we have now. And of course, there are many more problems. What seems to be good is that the transatlantic, in my view, is the transatlantic alliance will be re-established under Biden, although it's quite different from the way it used to be 10 years ago. But I think that's common sense. What does not work at all is that Europe finds an answer to the Chinese challenge. This is a very, very embarrassing and very. I'm really ashamed about the reaction, also of my country, towards this situation. It's the United States alone, almost alone, together with Australia, etc., who are posing a strong stand against this further. Well, it's a clear neo-colonialist way China is taking. If you look at Africa, for example, and we in Europe are still fighting among small nations, which is a ridiculous game. It's simply ridiculous, and we shouldn't afford that. I mean, we could do so much better, but I'm afraid now, given all understanding, I mean, it's easy to understand. Countries like Poland and Hungary, they are independent just for 30 years now, and of course, independence means something more to them than it means to us. We in Western Europe have realized already 50, 60, 70 years ago that we have to give up part of it at least. So did the East Europeans by signing the European treaties. And now, of course, they are afraid. There are many, I mean, this is a huge topic. I don't see how this problem will be solved at the moment. I'm quite pessimistic, but I'm sure that the government of Olaf Scholz and the Greens and the Liberal Party will try everything they can to keep it together, everything they can. The problem is, how far are you willing to accept the breaking of treaties, which has happened in Europe, and whether you can give in even more to semi-authoritarian governments like Hungary and Poland, as we did already. One of my favorite, I think the best German-speaking newspaper is the Neue Zürcher Zeitung, New Zurich paper. They have already written in a comment that the so-called community of values is pure fiction. I think this is too negative, but we are definitely approaching that point, and we have to make a clear stand where we are. It's absolutely unacceptable for any country in this type of Europe to repress the media, to put judges into jails, to change judges and hold lawsuits with your buddies, as is happening in Hungary, for example, and all the processes we saw in the last months in Poland and Hungary. It's absolutely unacceptable. So if the Polish government doesn't find an answer to this, I think this will be it. And it's very tragic. They don't know, they don't seem to know that they are going the Russian way. One should make it clear to the Polish people. I think most Polish people know that. As far as I see from here, if our reports are correct and we have very good, very free, independent media, I think most Polish people know that, and they don't want it.
Well, I can say that most Polish people are sure that they want to stay in European Union, and
Yes.
that a majority of Polish people also understands that there should be a link between rule of law and European funds. That Europe was supposed to be a community of values, and that you can't be an authoritarian state and at the same time stay in the European Union. So indeed, you are right to say that the majority of that Polish government and its policies represents only a minority. You said also that Germany needs to make a clear stand that the Polish government's behavior is unacceptable, and that Olaf Scholz will probably do everything keep Europe together. So what precisely can Poland expect from new government, Poland and other countries in Central Eastern Europe?
I think the French President Macron has already taken the first step. He could do that because he is in power. We don't have, it will take at least another 4 to 5 weeks until we will have a government. Then Olaf Scholz would exactly do the same. Ask the Polish to get away with this stuff. I forgot the precise terms. What happened with the this constitutional change in Poland? They have to re-establish the former government, the former constitution, I suppose. I'm not quite sure about this because I'm not really familiar with the domestic policy in Poland. But Scholz will certainly say, we, at least unofficially, we won't cut the money from Europe if you re-establish a democratic society and if you give back freedom to the press, especially to the laws, to the juridical sphere of society. Then
so the Polish government would have to revoke the so-called judicial reforms and
right. Yes, definitely. There is no chance without that. Otherwise, they will force us to say officially, okay, then we'll cut the money, because that's the only thing we can do. There is nothing in the present Constitution of Europe, which is based on the Treaty of Lisbon, which has to be reformed, of course. This doesn't work. This constitution doesn't work anymore, but that's another topic. There's nothing else we can do. You cannot kick anybody out. You cannot really leave. I mean, we've seen that circus. We spent 4 years in discussing with the British how to leave this planet. The British alone paid more than £2 billion for this process of holding conferences leading to nothing, just to expose Brussels to the point of ridiculousness. If you see what I mean, just discussing once or twice a month about this process of retreat from Europe for the sake of going home to London and telling the people, well, look, the Europeans don't want. This was so childish, what was happening. We can't afford this anymore. There's so much going on in Asia, Africa. The Chinese are proceeding and penetrating with military terms. I mean, this is neo-colonialism at its best, what's happening there. In comparison to this, Russia is almost weak. And we are doing childish fights here in Europe among each other. There are too many people who have forgotten what the European history was like. I mean, there was nothing greater. I don't know any example greater than the process of European integration that started after 1950. There's hardly anyone who can imagine what the situation between Germany and France was like before. I mean, this was so-called arch enemyship. Just imagine someone like Mr. Erdogan and Mr. Öcalan going to the mosque together, holding hands and preaching peace. Just imagine Netanyahu and Mr. Abbas doing the same, or Mr. Assad and all these guys. This is the European way, which was miraculous. There's nothing like this in history. And we are about to forfeit this. We are about to forget this. Now, as I said already, there are conflicts between the French and the British about the last two herrings in the channel, and they are sending out their submarines in order to protect the last British fishermen. This is just absurd. This we can't afford. We have to unite. We have to stay together. Together we are not only a population of more than 500 million. Together we are the strongest economy of the world. And if we could do this, if we could focus this in a political way, we would be the number one. It's not that Germany, this is also a problem for Germany, because that would mean that this is the problem we could see clearly in the last, let's say, about 15, 20 years. It was in particular our American friends, but also the French and all the others who demanded, and even Poland. I remember Sikorski, Foreign Minister Sikorski once said, "I'm not afraid of Germany anymore. I'm afraid if Germany doesn't do anything." And this is the other side of Angela Merkel, which I mentioned. I'm not sure whether she did enough in order to strengthen and put Europe on its feet, on its real feet. You know. But we are having problems because we are afraid. It's always the same game. If any German politician gets up too strongly and his sound is a bit too strong, of course, they immediately come and play with the old Nazi game. The problem is it doesn't work anymore with the population. It doesn't work anymore. So we should stop these things and try to take a reasonable way. I see pretty good chances with Olaf Scholz.
Konrad, you make a very profound and vast analysis on a number of issues, but I would suggest that we keep also following the developments in all these regards and also keep you somehow related to our podcast in the future, because we are now making somehow a sketch, but there certainly will be a lot of developments. And on this point, I suggest that we end the discussion now and have all our looks or aside at what Germany will follow and do in the near future.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Margosata and Vladimir, for having me.
And once again, don't forget to subscribe to Cross Border Talks. We will be following what happens in Germany, what happens in Europe, what is next with Poland and the European Union's future. And see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.